Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, we take a break from the action as I'm joined by friend of the show, Matt Risby of the Bad Spot podcast. Matt was kind enough to help me out with some world building as we construct Davennar, the city of spines, the city that bleeds. Also, as a note, as it hasn't come up before on the show, there are a few instances of adult language, so listener discretion is advised. Now let's get to it with episode 49. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. But today, I'm, in fact, not solo, and I'm not really playing either. It's a world-building episode, and joining me is the amazing Matt Risby of the Bad Spot podcast. Hello, Matt.
This is weird, isn't it? Not talking to yourself. It feels very strange.
It's very strange. But it's good. It's nice to actually have another mind and another voice to bounce off of.
Yeah, I appreciate the company. I normally spend my days drifting through space with a useless robot, so, this is good.
Excellent. Well, today we are going to spend a little bit of time to build out the city of Davennar. And Davennar is the rival city to Heartvale, the setting for my season 2 adventures with the Crest. And Matt was generous enough to offer his time to come on and help me build up a city, try to make it a little bit different than Heartvale, because who knows? Our heroes may end up in Davennar very, very soon. So let's jump right into it. We're going to be using an exercise from the Ultimate RPG Game Master's Worldbuilding Guide by James D'Amato. You might remember I did an exercise from this book with James before Season 2 started, where we built up some factions for Heartvale, most of which have come into play during this season. So we're going to go through this exercise bit by bit, and we'll see what we can build here. So we're going to start off with some basics. We're going to talk about the population, the shape, the age, and the wealth of this city. And because Davennar is a rival city to Heartvale, and Heartvale has some established, it has an established age, it has an established size. Some of these things we're not going to roll dice for, we're just going to decide. Some of these things we will roll dice for, but we're going to try and make it as interesting as possible. So, Matt, you ready to get started?
I was born ready.
Excellent. So let's talk about population. We need a rough idea of how many people live here. So I have some dice here. Should have warned you before we started recording, but I've got a D4, a D6, and a D8. I don't know if you have any of those available, if you want to roll some here, Matt, or if you would like me to do the roll.
I am surrounded by dice and other nerd ephemera are on my desk, so I'm sure I can dig up some dice from somewhere. What do I need? A D4, D8, and
D6, yeah. Let's start with a D4, and we're going to roll it, and it is going to give us either an eccentricity, an asset, or a corruption. And these are going to play in a little bit later as we will have some prompts that will help us build out some details of the city. So if you wouldn't mind rolling a D4 for me, that would be great.
Cool, I got a 1.
Perfect. So we get to choose an eccentricity or an asset. What do you think?
I'm all for eccentricities. I think that's If we're talking about giving a place character, I think that's where I'd like to begin.
Perfect. So we're going to attach this to the population. So the population is going to be large, which makes sense because Heartvale is one of the biggest cities in the region. And with Davennar being its primary rival, it makes sense for it to be equally as large. Maybe it's a little bit smaller because Heartvale is the jewel mercantile city in the world, really. So it's going to be large, maybe a little smaller than Heartvale, but still one of the largest cities in the world. And we're going to attach that eccentricity to the population when we get to it. But next, we're going to talk about the shape of this city. Let's roll another D4.
A 4.
Perfect. So this time we get to pick an eccentricity or a corruption.
Let's go for corruption this time.
They are, those evil Davennarans who are terrible to our good, kindly Heartvale citizens. All right, so condensed. This city has very limited space and was engineered to take advantage of every cubic inch to pack population and infrastructure. I think we can do something with that.
Okay, yeah.
Now let's talk about age. Go ahead and roll another D4.
2.
2. Again, another eccentricity or corruption.
Let's flip-flop back to eccentricity. I like the sound of that.
Perfect. And for this one, I'm going to say that it is historic because it's got hundreds of years of history. It's been around for about 600 years, same as Heartvale has. With the previous one, the shape, and really the first one as well, basically the D4 gave us those options to choose from, but they also gave us the size and the size of the population and the shape. So when you rolled a 4 on the shape, that gave me the condensed option in the book. We could have also had planned, contained, sprawling, but like I said before when we started, because Davennar already has a little bit of history to it in our world, I'm just going to choose the historic setting for that. Let's finish off with our basics. Wealth. One more D4.
That's a 1.
And a 1. We get a corruption and an asset. Perfect. And opulent is the result with a 1. Some of the wealthiest people and entities in the world spent staggering resources to develop this place. It is full of dazzling wonders and extravagant indulgences.
That's interesting. There would be a highly condensed place that's essentially in the shadow of a bigger, better place down the coast, but still have wonders and indulgence there. I'm sure there is a pretty interesting story behind that.
It already puts into my mind the thought of, are there underground structures? Did they go down as well as up? Like, is that part of this sort of condensed nature? Is they've just excavated parts of the city and have built down? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. So our traits that we've come up with, the eccentricity for population, corruption for shape, eccentricity for age, corruption and an asset for wealth, those are going to be tied to our various choices here. And we're going to pick some traits from the following table. So let's talk about population. And we've got an eccentricity. So here are the list of eccentricities that we can choose from. The city is built around inconvenient geography. The city was developed for very unusual transportation infrastructure. The city is built around and above an ancient metropolis. Wildlife and nature are incorporated into the city. The city was the setting for an iconic story or historical event and has embraced that identity. Historical disasters necessitated unique development. The city regularly experiences extreme weather, or the city isn't laid out on a grid, which I don't know that we can pick that one with it being condensed.
Yeah. The very first one where it said it was it based in an inconvenient geographical location?
Yes.
I mean, that would certainly explain why it had been built up and or down rather than out, which is the way that you would traditionally build something when you run out of room. So I wonder what geographical feature could constrain this city to such a small footprint.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So Hartvale is very well set up because it found itself in this vale, this like verdant vale that's surrounded by mountains. So it's a very defensible place. But Davennar doesn't have that same benefit. It doesn't have that same like protective wreath of mountains around it. So what kind of landscape could it have been that they, discovered? Because obviously it would have to be something that they could survive, but maybe they survive, from the sea, and they eat mostly fish, or whatever they had to do to survive. So the Davennarans, they escaped from Alfheim during the shrouding. And so those who survived were on these ships. They're, rowing away from the cataclysm that's happening behind them. What if their original ships got grounded and destroyed, basically, and they weren't able to, go anywhere else, basically? What if Davennar is on an island just off the coast? It's like far enough off the coast of the land that they couldn't just like swim over easily and like transport all their goods after the ships got run aground. Maybe there's even like, maybe I'll take back what I said about it not being a defensible location. What if there are like rocky, spines sticking out of the water? It's like, it's a very dangerous place for ships to travel other than like one particular harbor. And so the ships ran aground and they couldn't exactly get to the mainland. And so they just started building on this decently sized island, but still it's an island.
Yeah. And what if it's a really awkwardly, inconveniently shaped island with these kind of juts of rock sticking off in all directions, but literally every single square foot of flat rock has been built into or onto, or has some kind of function as the people who are drawn here by the trade and drawn here by the opportunity to make money or to make a name for themselves have to literally find somewhere to carve out for themselves, literally out of the rock in some cases. And whether that means that they've gone down into some kind of like geothermic kind of vents that are like built under the ground, or whether they've built on top of other buildings. I mean, the whole stretches of Europe, like if you go to Sicily, it's like the most conquered island in the world. Everyone's had a bit of that. And you can literally look at churches where it was a church and then it became a Baroque cathedral, then it became a Romantic cathedral, then it became a mosque, then it became other things. And like, maybe there's this idea that, instead of knocking something down, they just kept building on top of it. So all this history is under layers, and you can kind of see them in the architecture, and you can see them in everything, and you can't help but see it because it is everywhere. There is just so crowded and crammed.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really, really cool. All right, let's roll with it then. The next one is corruption. So here are the list of corruptions. Law enforcement does more harm than good. The cost of living is artificially inflated. Organized crime is powerful. An essential public asset is controlled by corrupt parties. Part of the city has been left to deteriorate. The city faces a massive bureaucratic challenge to enact any change. Civic leadership serves special interests before the populace. Illegal activity is necessary to conduct normal business, and violence is common.
I mean, I am a sucker for organized crime.
Sure.
Huge fan in these kind of settings. I mean, how much do you want to get into kind of the bureaucracy of a place and the politics of who allows who to do what? I think that would actually tie into if you've essentially got to find a spot and carve out a life there, or kind of hope that someone dies and move into theirs. Maybe that would befit the idea that there is this kind of corrupt authority, which is essentially just all about keeping the ships coming in and the goods going out. And, you know, being a citizen of this place, if you could even call it that, is probably not the greatest thing. But yeah, it depends how well that ties into the grander scheme of things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there is a reason that Heartvale and Davennar are rivals.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like mercantile rivals even. So there have to be some sort of merchants in Davennar who are at least able to produce enough and, you know, distribute enough to warrant that being a competition to Heartvale. And like that could be because of organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could have like literal crime families who are running goods here and there, and maybe some of those goods are, you know, illicit in some places, and so they make a little bit more money off of those things. Or it could be the bureaucracy divining things. Now, thinking of bureaucracy makes me think of there being a governmental force that basically decides who gets to live where.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe every few years there's some sort of, whether it be like a census or something like that, and that shifts around a little bit of like, oh, because thinking about a civilization that is trying to survive on an island and they're struggling for every little bit of land, you're going to prioritize the people who are contributing the most, quote unquote, to society. And they're going to get the better land. They're going to get the better housing, like all of these things. I don't know. Is that something?
No, I like that. And what if a good deal of the temporary housing in this place are, should we say, kind of like wooden slums, essentially, but because we're on an island, what if they're kind of built into an overhang of a cliff? So they are essentially hanging over the ocean, and every year or 3 years or some arbitrary amount of time that this bureaucracy decides, they will decide who moves out of there and up to a more stable footing, and, you know, who moves in, you know, maybe kind of political opponents or prisoners might find themselves in the overhanging slums and maybe not in the most stable of domiciles. And what if at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you said that some of the waterways around the island make it difficult to navigate on boat, what if there are these spines of rock that are kind of jutting out of the water? And what if the richest and the most well-to-do families, they live on top of those, like these plateaus, like these kind of columns of rock, and they're only accessible by a very, very kind of like select certain means that can get people up there and down there. And, you know, they've got these kind of like ranches, essentially, that are kind of on top of these. You know, they're not huge kind of wild expanses, but in terms of the space available to a normal person in this place, they are huge open spaces where, you know, there is, you know, greenery and kind of like living things, and those people can kind of just stroll around and look down on the kind of the grey, murky masses down on the island.
I like it. And I think something that has come up in some of my world building before is that those who escaped from the shrouding, they had access to Fey magic that has like fallen away, that knowledge has been lost over the last, you know, 600 years. And part of that was this very sort of like shaping the earth to get it the way that you want it to be. And so like Heartvale's oldest walls are like natural stone that was literally like raised up out of the ground by this mage who was trained in the old ways. And, you know, what if those who survived and escaped to Davennar had a mage who had similar abilities, and some of those rocky outcroppings, they actually carved like they carved into them. Because I'm trying to think of like, if you're on the sea, like, and you get bad weather like coming through, you know, you probably don't want to live your entire life up on the top of a, you know, higher rocky outcropping. If a hurricane blows through, like, you're probably going to want to have some sort of place that you can go and hide in. So what if some of, you know, like the earliest sort of like wealthy, powerful people had some of those places carved out, and then there are others that have since been built upon, and that knowledge has been lost. So you know, there's like the new money is trying to make something that approximates what the old money are living in, where they're carved out by ancient Fey magic.
Yeah, and maybe the ancient Fey magic is how they're accessible as well. And, you know, you either know it or you don't. And if you know it, that kind of grants you access to getting into these places and out. Because I think the ruling classes do need to go down to the island of Davennar, I guess,
Absolutely.
at times. They can't just spend all their times up there in their literal ivory towers. So they have to get down somehow. But, yeah, you don't want the man on the street coming up, because he'll probably have a few choice words for you when he gets there.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome. And I think there is then some like bureaucracy that governs who gets to live where in the city. And obviously the people who live in the ivory towers are the ones who are really in charge of all that. All right. So let's move on to another eccentricity. Was there a second one on that list that ticked your imagination when I first read it off, or you want me to read them off again since we bounced over to corruption?
Sorry, was it the eccentricity or the
so
corruption?
We can do another corruption right now if you've got another one off the top of your head, because we've got one more of those.
I think the organized crime thing ties in so well, because, you know, if you do have this kind of like elite ruling class, they are certainly don't want to get their kind of hands dirty, and they would want someone to do their kind of nefarious bidding for them. But then also, if it's a port and there's stuff going in and going out, someone's getting a taste of that. And maybe there's this interesting tension between that elite ruling class and this criminal underworld that kind of controls things when their masters aren't looking, type thing.
Yeah, cool. So I love the idea of there being organized crime and it being on all tiers of society. You know, you've got your wealthy people who have their fixers that they send out to take care of problems. You've got your merchants who are, you know, maybe trying to get a leg up. And then you've got your, you know, I'm sure there's all sorts of trading going on in that, you know, wooden stilt slum, and, you know, people trying to lift themselves up out of that by doing whatever jobs they have to. So cool. Well, let's grab one more eccentricity, and then we need to grab an asset. So the eccentricities again, since it's been a little bit, will be the city. We already did that one. This city was developed for very unusual transportation infrastructure. The city is built around or above an ancient metropolis. Wildlife and nature are incorporated into the city. The city was the setting for an iconic story or historical event and has embraced that identity. Historical disasters necessitated unique development. I mean, I feel like that's almost a given based on what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
This city regularly experiences extreme weather, and then the city isn't laid out on a grid.
What if you talked about the ships they arrived on running aground? What if they're kind of still there? And these ships are kind of standing as monument to the history of how this place was founded, but also a stark reminder of how dangerous it is if you don't know the right people to get there. So maybe these ships were these kind of huge vessels, kind of way bigger than anything that existed in the real world. And like there's kind of maybe two of them kind of forming this kind of like guard as you approach the safe route, and these are the two ships that didn't make it, and they kind of stand there forever, kind of enshrined on these rocks.
I love it. I think it's awesome. So we also need an asset. So this is going to be robust public transportation, a vibrant arts scene, celebrated culinary districts, exceptional schools or universities, access to unique natural or magical resources, booming industry, advanced medical care, accommodations for a specialized profession, access to natural public spaces, robust museums and historical sites.
They all sound way too nice to exist in this absolute shithole of a place that we're making.
But that's the thing, is because remember, it is also opulent. So like they've turned it into something.
I wonder if some of those things do exist, but they're just totally inaccessible to most of the people. Like, what if there is this kind of higher seat of learning, perhaps in somewhere built into one of those spines of rock that kind of comes out of the sea that is only accessible to a certain few, which keeps, those people in power. They've all got the same surname and have for many years, and they all know each other, and they're all kind of, greasing each other's palms to get into this place. And, maybe it's something that, hey, maybe it's a lighthouse. Maybe that's what it's held in, this kind of old ancient lighthouse, and it's this kind of this seat of learning that, I mean, what could it be? What would people want to learn there? Like navigation or kind of cartography or, some kind of maritime nonsense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense especially because Heartvale has the scriptorium, which is also this seat of learning. And while obviously you have to have a wealthy patron in most cases to like pay your way, it is in many ways like more accessible to the average Heartvale citizen. And like that could be a point of contention of like, oh, those Heartvalians or whatever, like they just give away knowledge where, we take knowledge sort of thing. It's like building into that rivalry between the two city states. And I also think that like navigation makes sense because if you are surrounded by all of these rocky spines and all this dangerous stuff, like you can probably take small boats and navigate them through there. And that's probably part of your course is you have to go down and chart a course through these with this little dinghy, and, good luck. And if you hit a rock and capsize, well, you failed.
And what better symbolic place to have a school of navigation than in a lighthouse? And when I say a lighthouse, a proper old school kind of Grecian giant flame in a bowl on the top of a kind of a pillar of rock. Absolutely. Lighthouse. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, the only other idea I had was some kind of like naval academy, but I don't know, like that, is that too kind of organized, or is that something that would need more space and need to be somewhere else, perhaps?
I feel like they have some sort of like formalized naval training. I imagine they probably have something similar to Heartvale where they have a required service just because the sea is so much a part of their survival. They want all of their citizens to know, how to survive. And probably for a lot of the Davennarans, your terms of service are how you get out of the like slums. Your first time out of the slums for most people is getting to go join the Navy. So unlike in Heartvale, where it's all very like regimented, and there's probably rarely people who are like volunteering early and like trying to like pass themselves off as older so they can get into service. Like I can picture these like, 13, 14, 15-year-olds like showing up to a dock and being like, yeah, I'm totally 17. take me. And, ship captains will either be like, all right, fine. I'll take a warm body, whatever. It could be an interesting part of that. So whether or not there's a formal naval academy or if it's more of a sort of school of hard knocks while you're out on the sea, I don't know. I feel like that could also be tied in with the navigation. Is like it's a school of navigation because that is the thing that they place, in the role of primacy. That's the topic, the subject, the skill that you absolutely need to have. But we teach other things about sailing and naval engagements there as well.
I wonder whether there's this kind of tiered system where you've got, you have it a lot here where you have officers kind of colleges where your rich kids go and they learn to go straight in at the top without having done, a single day on the front lines. Then you've got all your grunts and everyone. And I wonder whether, the vast majority of the people in the Navy are kind of kids literally peeled off the walls and kind of like chucked onto a boat, and they're serving under these officers who have, barely broken a nail their whole lives because they've been up on the spines.
Yeah, I think that's very, very likely that is exactly how it goes. All right, now I think, we've got some cool sort of foundations for Davennar. Now let's start to flesh it out a little bit. And we're going to do that by building a landmark. So if you would like to roll a d6, we're going to narrow down to a specific concept.
Okay, I rolled a 1.
It's a monument.
Okay, a monument to what?
Is this a new monument, a modern monument, as in like in the last couple hundred years, a classic monument, the last, we'll say back to the founding, or an ancient monument? Was this something that was here that predated the founding of the city?
I wonder whether it would say a lot about the city and who built it. That would it be fair to say that maybe the lighthouse is predates the founding of this city? This is some kind of ancient culture has left this lighthouse here, because clearly this stretch of land definitely either had or has some kind of geographical significance as a port or a defensive position. But what if there was another monument right in the center of where the city is now? And would it say a lot about the people who run this place if they just built a really egregious statue to the city's founders right on top of it?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Like a real kind of pompous statue of some guy who, and maybe this statue is protected day and night by a kind of a guard who stop the kind of the down at heels spitting on it as they pass on their way down to the docks to work. But it's built on some kind of, whether it's like a natural rock formation or some other kind of like beautiful thing that no one's ever seen, that perhaps was the only other remnant of the civilization that used it beforehand. And it perhaps speaks to the kind of short-term thinking of the people who run this place and what they think of themselves.
Yeah, I like it. Well, that actually leads very well into our next prompt, which is choose 2 words to define a style. And I've got a list. I think we may have already discovered some of these, which is ostentatious, utilitarian, iconic, welcoming, graceful, menacing, rustic, anachronistic, or detailed.
I think the idea of ostentatiousness is great. And for some reason, every time I was just in my head when I was thinking about a statue there, I was thinking of the classic Napoleon picture of him with the horse with its leg up by David. What if someone, and the idea of that style of painting was to make people look heroic, and it was no kind of like, it was idealism rather than realism, right? And what if the central statue of this place, which is reflected in a lot of the place's ostentatious architecture, is some weedy dude from the past who has been made to look heroic riding a sea serpent.
Oh, I like it.
Maybe with a trident in his hand as well. Like he's kind of been made out to be this kind of like the person who overcame adversity and got the people through the rapids to get here and founded this place, but it was just one lucky son of a bitch who survived being shipwrecked, and he just happened to kind of live by clawing himself onto a wooden plank that managed to make it to kind of dry land, and perhaps that is part of the myth making of this place, and speaks to these kind of social divisions and how people feel about each other and treat each other, I guess.
I love it, and I almost want to ask if it takes away from it if he was like one of the navigators on one of the ships that like just crashed into the rocks.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Like he was like, no, stay the course. I know exactly where we're going. And but everyone else is dead now, so I can build a statue to myself, so it's fine. Yeah, no, I like that a lot.
Okay, cool. So the next thing would be to choose primary materials used to build the landmark. And this involves rolling, but I don't know that this necessarily is important because the options are like metal, stone, concrete, brick, glass, mud, wood, straw. I feel like this is probably either stone or metal.
I really like the idea that if it's a dangerous place to get to, like so much of the wooden structures are repurposed shipwrecks. And like you'll see things like the steps leading up to people's houses are gangplanks, for example, or you'll see bits of masts kind of holding up other structures, or everything that washes up here that's been crashed here has been repurposed, reused, and kind of forms the character of this place. They picked through the bones of these ships and these poor vessels that didn't make it and built what they could from it, because it's not like they've got access to huge forests to cut down all these trees, right? So it has to be brought in or it has to wash up, and I think that's what they do.
So do you think it's a statue that's continually like it's made out of wood and it's continually being repaired, and that's part of the like disconnect in society as well? Because all these other people that are, down in the lower tiers of society are like, why are they wasting all this good wood to repair a statue of some idiot?
I wonder whether they, what do they call it now? The bit on the front of the boat that's like typically a kind of like a figurehead kind of, maybe they took one of those and kind of repurposed it and kind of like carved it down to be more representative of the person they're trying to reflect, but it still doesn't quite look like them. But it's like you say, it's a complete waste of good wood that could be used for something else, that maybe replace some kind of rotten structure that's unsafe to live in, but it isn't. It's been constantly reused as this kind of monument to people that no one like in this place.
Why would anybody want to live here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the next part of it is you need to know what kind of story those disparate elements tell. But I feel like we have established what that story tells. So I think we can wrap up the landmark, because I've got a pretty like clear picture of this thing in my mind. So we're going to meet some residents now. So cities are full of compelling symbols and themes, but they really need characters to come to life. This part of the exercise will help create pivotal NPCs to help drive the plots unfolding in the city. So if you want to roll another D6 for me, we'll narrow down our resident to a specific concept.
Okay, 2.
Perfect. A criminal.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so choose an advantage. Is this person brilliant, influential, wealthy, skilled, or principled?
I mean, you did just say, like, who would want to live here, right? So that is a great question. Who would want to live in this place? And I think the reason that you would want to live in this place is that if you're smart and if you're kind of cunning enough and you're crafty enough, you can make a killing here, right? So I kind of feel like a key criminal who plays a part in the organized crime of this place has to kind of be brilliant, right? They have to be thicker than the other thieves, and they have to be able to balance this kind of cut and thrust of the dirty work of being a criminal and running an organized crime mob, but also placating the nobility that seem to kind of rule over this place without putting anyone's nose out of joint. And I feel like that would have to be a pretty gifted politician with a small p, and someone who is ruthless and clever and perhaps charismatic and can get people to do what they want. And I don't think it's going to be some kind of shady lumbering oaf that's just ruling over the place with an iron fist. It has to be someone who knows how to play the game of this place, because you'd have to be an idiot to think that you could make it there without any kind of smarts or advantage. And I think that this person has that in abundance.
I agree. Next, we get to choose a disadvantage. Are they impulsive, cruel, stubborn, foolish, or marginalized?
How about stubborn, right? And how about the fact that they probably could go and move to Heartvale and move into a nice estate somewhere with a vineyard. But for whatever reason, they can't let go. And whether that's a code of honor or whether that's something else, whether that's another person keeping them there, or whether they don't think their job is perhaps done, or whether they think the place will fall apart without them. What if they're just holding on that bit too long?
That's just one more score.
Yeah, exactly that. But yeah. Just they're trying to think about how much of a big vineyard they can afford. But I wonder whether they are perhaps their stubbornness is creating an opportunity for others as well, who think that maybe they're losing their grip, maybe the willingness to hang around is perhaps a sign of weakness, and perhaps there are others in the position to perhaps take over that are looking to take advantage of that.
I love it. All right, Matt, this may be the most important roll of this entire thing. I need you to roll 2d6. If you roll a 6 or lower, this criminal is going to be an antagonist to my characters when they eventually end up in Davennar. If you roll 7 to 9, they'll be useful. If they're 10 or higher, then they'll be helpful without a cost.
Okay. 7.
Ooh, okay. So they're useful, but at a cost.
Well, that makes sense if they're smart, right? They don't give out stuff for free.
So this is great, because this character that we're building right now is going to show up when they reach Davennar, because we've decided this now. But they will be useful at a cost, and we'll find out what that cost is eventually. So I need you to choose 2 out of these. Is this person rapidly changing the city? Are they in over their head? Do they need something important from the PCs? Do they have valuable information? Or do they have an unlikely goal? And you get to choose 2.
It would be really awesome if they needed something from the PCs. And what if, right, Steve, what if the thing that had been keeping this crime boss on this wretched island all this time, something that perhaps they had lost sight of, that they're kind of hanging on for to arrive, maybe that is represented by the arrival of our heroes. There's something that they have or something that they represent that this crime boss might look at and go, okay, now that's here, I can perhaps think about leaving. What that is, I don't know. This is your game. It's not my problem.
You're just going to give me you're going to walk me right up to the ledge and then let me jump off myself.
I will paint you into that corner, Steve, and then close the door and leave.
I like it, because it can either be a very good thing for a crime boss when a mercenary company shows up on the docks, or a very bad thing, depending on, where that crime boss is operating and what those mercenaries are after. So yeah, that'll be super interesting. And then I need one more from you.
I think knowledge, having insider knowledge of something, because leverage, I guess, would be a big thing to this person. Yeah, and I think that possibly maybe they're holding just that one piece of information that could bring the whole house of cards down, but they are perhaps not in the position to reveal what that is, and perhaps the person that bit of knowledge is about might know this and might see this crime boss leaving the island as an opportunity to, be rid of that knowledge being out there somewhere. I think they definitely know something about something that very few other people know. And I guess you don't get to be where you are if you don't.
Yeah. Since you mentioned, there being people who might want to take over for this person or, kick them out of their position, overthrow them, maybe whoever they have knowledge about knows that they have knowledge about. Let's talk about allies and enemies. So who are their allies in this city and who are their enemies? And we can be pretty general about this.
I think you probably can't run the game without keeping like the captains of industry on side, right? So like the harbor masters, the stevedores, unions, or whatever, all of those kind of like trades, they would definitely keep on side. So if that's a given, then would the opposite be? So maybe the traders and the merchants, the people who are looking to exploit that labor, are perhaps always kind of bumping up against this person. I mean, obviously there are, I think, rival kind of gangs and crime bosses or interests would always be, because like power is something that people want, right? So if this person's in charge, there's got to be other people gunning for the throne. But I really like the idea of this person just being so much of a cut above everyone else, that everyone else literally is like a 2-bit criminal who can barely organize, a kind of like a 2-man stick up in an alleyway behind a pub. And this person has managed to kind of keep the wheels of dirty money and clean money moving to and through this place for maybe decades, maybe like a long time. And the sun is going down on their era, and there are other people looking to kind of move in and supplant them, but they literally don't have a clue because they're very small fish in this big fish pond, I guess. Because anyone with half a mind would have left ages ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, why wouldn't you? You've got barely enough money scraped together to get out.
Yeah.
Whereas this person is just waiting for something, and maybe they don't even know what it is yet, but they're holding on for some reason. What is a memorable feature
of the person?
Yes. And, I've got maze rats open here. There's a physical details table. We could roll on that, see if that strikes our fancy.
I think like a physical detail or like an affectation as well, I think would be really good to bring them to life.
Yeah. So I'm going to go roll 2d6. I've got a 2 and a 1, bronze skinned, or it could be 1 and 2, battle scars.
Battle scars can be a bit hackneyed. I wonder if this person has managed to get into this position without ever having picked up a knife or a sword, or you've got to be brilliant to kind of make it here. And maybe the idea that maybe if we can take that kind of that prompt of bronze skinned of basically meaning really healthy looking, kind of like vibrant, that kind of, that Mediterranean vibe of people who just kind of spend all day eating good food, drinking good wine and having good company and like living best lives and just looking healthy. And I think that's something like in this place where people have got faces like fried breakfasts, this person stands out as someone who, they just stand out. You would look when they walked in, and weirdly, like all the other people don't seem to mind them. They don't treat them any differently, but they don't belong here in a sense. They stand out. They're kind of incongruous in their appearance. They're too clean. They're too healthy looking amongst these kind of scurvy-ridden, like kind of hatchet-faced wretches that populate this place.
Yeah. All right, let's do a mannerism as well. So I've got 5 and 2, which is rhyming, or 2 and 5, highly formal.
Oh, highly formal. God, as much as I would like to have an MC who basically just spits bars at everyone. It would be good, but that's a challenge for you to say all of their dialogue in iambic pentameter.
Yeah, that's gonna triple my recording time.
Yeah. Someone who speaks not befitting of their surroundings. Someone who kind of sound, how like sometimes you see old talk shows and you see kind of old celebrities talking, and they talk in that way that people don't talk anymore. Like, they don't have the filler words, they don't and ah, they just talk in this. They watch someone like David Niven speaking, and I'm not suggesting this person be kind of like a dandy, but I'm kind of suggesting this person almost feels like someone out of time. They're completely not otherworldly. They're definitely from this world, but they are kind of very different, and in every way, the way they look, the way they speak, the way they carry themselves.
Yeah, I really like that. All right.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck role playing that.
I'm excited about that. So that's the magic of editing, is cutting out all the filler words and then just slathering it all together. Let's name this person. And I'm going to ask you, and you can choose or you can roll. Is this a man or a woman?
Flip a coin, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Odd number. I'll roll a dice. Odd number is male. Even number is female. 4, female.
All right. So go ahead and give me a D100. I've got 3 female name tables from Dice Geeks.
Okay, 28 or 82?
28 is Chansey, Lark, or Westina. That's the 28. 82 would be Elvina, Aletta, or Rainbow.
Of the 6 of that, I'm not blown away by a lot of those. So, but before we re-roll, how does Aletta sound to you?
I feel like Aletta sounds like somebody who would be upper class. But like, I think that might work because she's highly formal. Maybe this is a name that she's taken on.
Yeah.
We can roll again and see if we find something else that strikes our fancy and keep Aletta in the background.
Okay. Yeah. 54 or 45.
So 54, we've got Mertice, Bronte, Tiffany.
I love that they kind of went fantastical, literary. I think we're alone now. That's how that went. Yeah, okay. What's the name of this table you're using? Is it mole rats or maze rats? Tiffany is a real mole rat name.
This is from the great book of random tables from Dice Geeks.
Dice Geeks, okay.
Dice Geeks, yeah. So let's do 45. Alvina, Cleantha, or Sydney?
Now, hear me out. Sydney.
Boy, okay.
Sydney, right? Sydney is a name of a character played by Philip Baker Hall in 2 movies. The same actor played a character by the same name who is almost exactly the same character over the period of, I think, like 20 years. One is Midnight Run, which is my favourite movie. And he's kind of like this fixer, and he's the guy who plays Sydney. And secondly, a film called Sydney, which was changed the name to Hard 8, the first movie by Paul Thomas Anderson. Similar kind of like crime figure in their advancing years, who perhaps held on to things too long. So I almost feel like it's fated that this character is called Sydney.
I can live with that. Should we give them a surname or should it just be Sydney?
I think they should have a surname. And personally, I don't think it matters if it doesn't fit, because I bet you it's not real.
Yep. Should we go upper class or lower class?
Lower class, I reckon.
All right. I don't know if you can roll 2d6 on there and get separate numbers or if it adds it together automatically. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it. I've got a 1 and a 3.
1 and a 3. I've got berry cloth, or 3 and 1 would be Gimbal, but I already have a character named Gimbal, so I don't want to use that.
Sydney Berrycloth sounds a little bit Prancing Pony, doesn't it?
It does.
What about what do those numbers give you on the upper class?
Caliver or Gastrel?
Sydney Gastrel. Or Sydney Caliver, was it?
Caliver, yeah.
Yeah. I think like both Sydney of those
Caliver.
work. Sydney Caliver. And like I said, that name is so not real. That is the name that's picked off a dead soldier's uniform. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
That's not real.
Perfect. All right, so we've got a pretty good sense of this person. So that'll do it for Sydney. We'll see her show up in the show at some point. And honestly, after this whole conversation about organized crime and the way this city has been built and Sydney Caliver, I'm going to find it very hard not to run a solo Blades in the Dark game in Davennar.
Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah. So I'm as soon as we started talking about this and going down this line, I'm like, I may have to do a little like side story because I've been trying to think
I'll do that with you. I don't care.
Perfect.
But let's do it.
Perfect. Let's do it. All right.
Yep.
So we're going to move on from our resident criminal to our last little bit of world building that we're going to do, which is going to be an event or a rumor to give this city a little bit of personality.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to narrow down our event or rumor to a specific concept by rolling a d6.
Okie dokie. 5.
An opportunity.
So
choose a schedule. Is this recurring? This is the sort of thing that happens on a schedule, might happen annually, a few times a year. Is it dormant? This is something that has existed in the past or generally played out behind the scenes. It is not impossible that something like this could happen, but it is unexpected. Or is it singular? This is a completely unique occurrence and is not expected to happen again.
The first thing that sprung to my mind just hearing that is what if there is a significant date upcoming that should signal the return of a vessel that set off some years ago that is supposed to come back for some reason? Whether it's like an exploratory ship or something along those lines, or it's a ship that's thought lost that's coming back, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, we're in a kind of like a port, I guess. Either that, or what if it is something that has already happened by the time you get to Davennar, and it is a shipment or consignment that has arrived that has some huge level of interest with what's contained within the cargo of that ship.
Okay. Yeah, those are both really good options, and let's keep them in the back of our mind. So we'll just say a singular event.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we continue to build this out, then we'll keep those in mind to develop them. So the next one would be to choose 2 key groups driving the action and one being affected in the background. So we've got the marginalized, the working class, the remarkable, those being, highly educated, skilled, magical powers, responsibilities, the wealthy and powerful.
It would be really interesting if the marginalized had the potential to be affected by this in 2 ways. Like, it would probably, whatever it is, affect them negatively the way that everything always does.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps also there is an opportunity there for things to change. And that is what perhaps has people interested.
And perhaps it's a certain crime lord that could push things in a certain direction.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
It's very possible.
Okay, so with that in mind, does that make the marginalized the person who's affected in the background, or
I think so.
Okay,
I think so. Yeah, because I think that if you're telling this story and you're kind of exploring this place, then you're probably going to do that a lot from the point of view of the people in power. And I think that the marginalized groups, the people who have existed on the fringes, should essentially kind of be nameless or kind of faceless until that opportunity does give them a chance to make that change or affect that change. And then I think that makes it probably a lot more effective if there is suddenly this uprising. And let's say that it's something that the elite and the rich could use to their advantage as well, to maybe put down the marginalized groups even further than they are. So there is vested interest in whatever this is from a lot of parties.
Yeah, so I'll put down the wealthy and the remarkable, the skilled are the ones who are driving the action, with the marginalized being affected in the background. Cool. So once again, we're going to roll 2d6. If it's 6 or lower, the event will cause a crisis. If it's 7 to 9, it will change the future. See, the book already knows. Or 10 or higher, it will give people what they need.
Well, it's a 10, so I wonder whether whatever this is might be a way out of destitution and poverty, and it might be an answer to a problem that a marginalized group has, but also the rich people don't want them to have that solution. What that is, I do not know.
Well, we're gonna figure out a little bit, because we have to choose 2. So it's going to be the whole city will be drawn in. This creates a special environment that changes expected behaviors and loyalties. People will discuss silent truths. The city will look and feel different. Everything will hinge on a single moment.
Oh, I mean, that's too cool to pass up, isn't it? Everything will hinge on if we're talking about a singular occurrence that happens, just once at a certain point in time, that perhaps the fate of the entire city depend on. Yeah. I mean, that's too awesome to pass up as a storytelling opportunity, isn't it?
It is. So, okay. So everything will hinge on a single moment. We need one more. So the city will look and feel different. Will people speak silent truths? Does it create a special environment that changes expected behaviors and loyalties? Will the whole city be drawn in?
Yeah, the whole city's got to be drawn in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think something to which everyone has a vested interest is always interesting, because there's a lot of irons in the fire, and narratively you've got so many options to kind of explore.
I'm going to spend now 45 episodes in Davennar because of all this stuff.
Welcome to 2028 Errant Adventures. I'm still in this fucking place.
I really wanted to go back to Starforged. Oh, all right. So we've got a couple questions here to round this out. Would an outsider know that something unusual is happening? If so, how would they tell? I feel like it's got to be yes, right? If the whole city is being drawn in.
Yeah, I think because of how the place feels when you see it, to see the people acting differently to what you would feel like if you lived here would be, maybe not everyone, but someone like Ben, one of the people who have been around a bit and kind of a bit savvy about the world, would pick up on it. Perhaps someone who just kind of drifted in from, the next fishing village along perhaps wouldn't, but, someone who's a bit more kind of astute would pick up on it, I think, definitely.
And that's because people are acting differently than what you'd expect based on the environment that they're in.
Yeah, I think so. Like maybe there's a kind of like an atmosphere of kind of expectancy or foreboding that's kind of very tangible when someone who's been around and been in a lot of situations that requires that kind of sixth sense understanding of vibes, and I think that's where you would notice that. I think.
What will be the most significant day for these events?
Oof.
Is it as cliche as like founding day or shipwreck day, whatever they might call it, or is it the antithesis of that?
I reckon it's a day. I wonder whether, and like not this, I wonder if it is a prophesized date whether it is something that perhaps, let's say it was a vessel that went out exploring and said, we'll be back on this exact date with this information or whatever, and that day is looming, and perhaps the island is kind of split with the people who kind of believe that that's going to happen, the people who really need it to happen, and the people who don't want it to happen because perhaps it would reveal some truths that they are particularly not keen on being public. But either way, I think a date that everyone knows, that's not just a coincidence, it's a date that people are expecting this thing to happen, and maybe that's what the change is in the atmosphere of this place, that there's this expectancy that this day is looming. But what exactly that day is, I don't know.
Okay. How can the PCs have an impact on this situation?
That is a great question. I've almost forgotten about those guys because we've made yeah. I mean, why are they going to Davennar, or why would they go to Davennar?
To hunt the Vidala family, to hunt these cultists of Vargaush.
So both of those parties need to have a vested interest in this day and this event.
Yeah.
And that is how the PCs will kind of weave themselves into the tapestry of history of this place.
Okay, so I've been thinking for a while of like, what if it's some sort of treasure galleon?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're saying something about like exploration. Like, what if they went out saying like, we're going to go and recover something? What if it's going into the Shroud? And historically, any ship that sails into the Shroud just sails right back out, and they're confused and like have no memory of what happened in there.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was like, all right, I think I've figured out how to penetrate the Shroud, and we're going to do it. And we'll be back, calculating out all of our stuff. Like, I've seen a vision of going through the Shroud, and I know I'll return, and it's going to be on this day. And so they're going to bring back artifacts of the old world. And of course, this cult of, an old dead god would be interested in that, as would the Crest be interested in stopping that.
And do you know what other information they'll bring back with them that would be very valuable is the knowledge of how to get through the Shroud.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I can 100% see why everyone would have a vested interest in something like that. Yeah, a kind of a mysterious exploratory galleon that disappeared or went through the Shroud and didn't just come straight back out, and it's been gone for a long time. And maybe this kind of crazy captain, this crazy navigator who was like, I can do it, you won't believe me, and if, you don't believe me, I won't be back like when you say I will be. I'll be back on this day.
Yeah.
And people kind of laughed him off and kind of completely disparaged him, but then some people believe them because, what else is there to believe in on this place? And they disappeared into the Shroud and didn't immediately just come back, and they've been gone for years, decades.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows who will come back?
Yeah. And that's really cool because of something that I'm not going to spoil for you or any of our listeners, because there's
say zombie plague fleet, Steve. Come on, cut to the chase.
Well, I don't want to tie myself to any particular raft. I go where the dice decide. All right, cool. So that is this event that is looming, and that day is coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
And not so soon that I think this is important for me, is like not so soon that like the heroes show up and then it's the next day. They've got to have enough time to sort of marinate in the city before they're like, oh, wait, people are like starting to get a little jazzed about something. What is it? So that'll be an interesting tightrope for me to walk, because what is preventing them from just charging right to where the Vidala are and slaughtering them all, and we get out of the season in 2 episodes in Davennar. Woo!
I think that's interesting as well, because it gives your PCs a chance to turn up and experience Davennar before the run up to this event happens. They get to
Yeah.
see what it's like, and then something happens. I don't know, a messenger, a raven turns up, or whatever plot device you can think of to kind of shoehorn in there, and then things change. They can see how things change, and perhaps their plans that they do have are kind of complicated or muddied by this sudden event that is looming on the horizon.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, that will do it for our world building. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Matt for coming on the show and helping me create what is a really cool city. And I am looking forward to spending some time there.
It was absolutely my pleasure, Steve. I said to you when we were kind of planning this that I kind of prefer world building to actually playing the games, because you get to come up with all this cool stuff and then you don't have to worry about it. Well, I certainly don't have to worry about it. You do. I do. And I apologize sincerely. But no, that was really fun.
As we say in the Iron Sworn community, prep is play.
Prep is play. Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, please tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. If you search The Bad Spot, it will bring up a weird country and western song first, but then I'm kind of second down the list. You can also find me on Twitter at The Bad Spotcast, and I think that's pretty much it. I don't have too many other outlets other than Twitter and YouTube. But yeah, come and find me. Come and check out my show. I'm doing some kind of how-to videos at the moment for people who want to get into Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged. But in a couple of weeks, I'll resume the campaign that's been running for a year now.
Happy anniversary.
Yes, thank you. It just happens to be the exact year that I posted my first video today. Yeah.
Yeah, and I highly recommend The Bad Spot. It's the pinnacle of Ironsworn Starforged actual play content out there in the world right now.
Too kind. Thank you very much.
Wow. And you can go and listen to some awesome little pieces of fiction written by members of the community, including yours truly, as Matt does a really cool community-driven little fiction spot right at the beginning of each episode. And there's some really amazing writers and storytellers contributing to that.
Yeah, that's been a real kind of experience for me, because I started writing them myself as like just a little way to use the fiction prompts from the oracles. And then I asked for submissions, and they just kind of haven't stopped. And you're in the Two Timers Club. There's a few people who have submitted a couple of pieces, and I love reading them out, and I get very nervous. I kind of am someone who doesn't get nervous about a lot of things, but I get very nervous about reading the Tales from the Drift, because I really don't want to upset anyone by mangling their beautifully written flash fiction. But there you go, no one's complained so far.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much, and to all of you out there, I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thank you so much to Sirenscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at coffee.com/errantadventures. That's ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.